Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Lynette. Before we move on to the subject of many paths lead to the same destiny, I want to go over an epiphany I recently got. And that is, I know in the recent past, I have spoken to you about trying to keep a positive outlook and keeping your head above water, basically feeling happy. And then you have these negative Nancys calling you, and they have nothing but bad news. And it's okay if a friend has bad news because you want to be there for your friends. But when they start telling you about their aunt's neighbor's sister, and I start thinking to myself, how do I tell these people that I don't want to hear all this bad stuff? I don't want to hear the problems of the world. So it was actually on a TV show, and I often get my epiphanies off of certain TV shows, that they said, instead of thinking about the bad things and living in the what ifs, why don't we celebrate the good things that have happened in our lives? And I started really thinking about that, and it made so much sense. The good things that have happened are real. The what ifs are not real, and you can't deal with what ifs. You can't cope with what ifs. So for here on out, a way of trying to adjust your thinking is to celebrate the good that has happened. And that does go along with gratitude as well. So when somebody calls and they're very, very negative, think about the good that has happened and celebrate that. Now I want to talk to you about many paths leading to the same destination. And with that being said, I think we all pretty much have the same destination in mind. The majority of us anyway, and that is health, prosperity, love, success, all of those things that we all have in common. But it doesn't mean there is any one path to get there. It doesn't mean that there is any one correct or right way to get there. I'm going to share with you an experience that I had in my own life, and it became like the elephant in the room more recently. And that is because the person that has presented it to me is now in a crisis themselves. So for me to address it with them and say how it makes me feel, at this point would be cruel. However, it doesn't mean that it doesn't bother me. I want to just go over this scenario quickly with you. When I was around 14 years old, I met this girl. We became very good friends, and I thank God for her friendship because she helped me through all the adolescent times. We went through all those growing pains together, and she would listen to me for hours on end with the problems that you have at that age. I remember she was one of those kind of friends that we were both too young to drive, but we took her mother's car because a cute guy was coming down the street. And she wanted to pull up next to him and ask if he wanted a ride. But unfortunately, she forgot it was in reverse from backing out the driveway. So she floored it, and we went backwards so fast. So I know this kind of things when you have someone to share it with. It is a blessing, and I'm so grateful she was in my life. But then as we got older and kind of grew apart, and I got my illness that I've shared with you, I asked her to pray for me, and she wouldn't pray for my healing. And I didn't understand that. I thought, my gosh, this is my best friend. I'm in the biggest crisis or trial of my life, and she is turning her back on me. That's how I felt. So when I would talk to her, she would come close to praying that, but would never really say the words that gave me comfort in knowing that a friend a very dear friend was there and on the same page. So as time went on, when we would talk, it got to be where I was being preached to. And what I had to say would be overridden by longer, louder vocals. So this happened multiple times to the point where when I would be on the phone, I would start to react physically. I could feel it. I could feel it in my being. So I kind of backed off a bit, although still loving this person. I mean, you can't be friends with someone forever and just all of a sudden not care about them. So I care very much. We spoke recently, without going into too much detail because that's irrelevant. Now this person, as I mentioned earlier, is in crisis themselves. And I want to share with her that her way is not the only way. The path I'm on, the journey I'm on may be different, yes, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. So now that brings me to the point of this podcast, and that is there's many paths to the same destination. If a person feels that their path is the only path, for lack of a better word, I would call that somewhat narrow-minded. And if you are open to the fact that somebody doesn't have to be just like you, otherwise we would all have the same color hair, we'd all live in the same country, we'd all live on the same block, we'd all go to the same church, we would all vote for the same person. We are a product of our experiences, of the way our minds work, our spiritual experiences, what brought us to this point. And it's not to say it's right or wrong, it is right for us. And I do believe every individual has their own right path. It takes a certain amount of evolving to be able to see that perhaps your way of thinking about anything and everything isn't always the right way, that somebody else's way might work better for them. And so if you can open to that, I would say you're more evolved. So what do you do with these people that haven't evolved to that point? Like any person that becomes toxic to you, and I think when you talk to someone and they make your body react physically, they have become toxic to you. So you need to back off a bit, kind of keep them at arm's length and still love them. And that's the point I'm at right now. It's not necessarily easy. It's actually confusing. And I do want to be there for my friend. But it doesn't matter if she or anybody else thinks their way is the only way. I'm talking to you or those of us that have evolved enough to know that somebody else's way isn't necessarily the right way. You got to be open to that. Otherwise, we would all be cookie cutters of each other. With all that being said, it brings us to the point where you know your way isn't the only right way. When you really think about it, nobody knows my relationship with God Almighty. No one knows how I really feel about things. So again, each person comes to the place that they feel is right, but you've got to be evolved enough or in the know enough or open enough to know that your way is not the only right way. And if you haven't come to that place yet, I hope you will toy with the idea that what you think about something, whether it be religion, politics, whatever, that you will consider the idea that perhaps the way others look at things is just as good as the way you do. It's just simply different. So, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, let's celebrate the good that has happened and not dwell on the what ifs that are the bad things that could happen. For now, have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.